the beginning of the end. It started with the bees. For years, their numbers had been dropping. Colony collapse disorder had wiped out entire populations, and while scientists scrambled to understand why, crops began failing. At first, farmers compensated. Hand pollination, genetic modification, artificial substitutes, all of it bought time. But time wasn't on anyone's side. Then came the blights. Fungal infections spread faster than anyone expected. Wheat rust, rice blast, and banana wilt, diseases that had existed for centuries, mutated into unstoppable strains. Entire harvests failed, one after another. By the time governments realized the scale of the problem, famine had already begun. The world was built on an illusion of abundance. Grocery stores fully stocked, fast food on every corner. But beneath that it was fragile. A few missed harvests, a few supply chain failures, and then collapse. At first, the public barely noticed. Prices at the supermarket started creeping up. Milk, eggs, fresh produce, everything cost more. Some shelves were emptier than usual, but news outlets reassured people it was temporary. Then, food stopped appearing at all. Major distributors couldn't secure supplies. Warehouse stock ran dry. Shipments failed. Farmers couldn't grow enough, and what they did grow was either infected or too expensive to distribute. Cities felt it first. Rural communities lasted longer, but no one was immune. People hoarded whatever they could find. Grocery stores were looted. The government tried to enforce rationing, but without supply, there was nothing left to ration. And then came the riots. The world was already on the brink. Nations had been hoarding grain and fertilizer, restricting exports to secure their own food supply. China had bought up vast portions of global farmland. The United States was struggling with climate-induced crop failures, and Russia weaponized wheat exports in response to international sanctions. Tensions between the United States, China, and Russia grew as global hunger increased. Nations that had once traded peacefully now threatened military action over dwindling resources. The Global South suffered the worst, with countries in Africa and South Asia relying on grain imports that never arrived. The world was no longer united by trade. It was divided by survival. The New World Order has emerged from the ashes of the Old World. Governments have consolidated power, and new alliances have formed. The struggle for survival has redefined global politics and societal structures. The United States declared a national food emergency. The military seized control of food distribution centers, prioritizing government officials, essential workers, and the wealthiest elites. The middle class and poor were left to fend for themselves. Cities collapsed into chaos as people fought for the last remaining canned goods. Rural areas formed militia enclaves, hoarding supplies and turning away outsiders at gunpoint. China funneled all remaining resources into mass-producing lab-grown protein and algae farms. Cities remained under strict lockdown. Anyone caught hoarding or stealing food was executed on sight. The Communist Party created fortress cities, where only the most useful citizens were allowed to stay. Those who failed to contribute were exiled to die outside the walls. With most of the Middle East reliant on imported grain, food shortages quickly turned into armed conflict. Countries stopped exporting water. Desalination plants became targets for sabotage. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Iran fought proxy wars over the last viable farmlands. European countries tried to hold together, but without food imports from Asia and the United States, the EU dissolved. The UK, France, and Germany each closed their borders, turning away refugees and rationing what little food remained. Mass starvation hit within months. The streets of Paris, once filled with tourists, were now home to desperate, starving mobs. Russia, with its vast wheat fields, seemed poised to survive. But even they faced a crisis. A brutal winter, soil degradation, and government mismanagement meant harvests were smaller than expected. The Kremlin hoarded resources, exporting nothing, as the rest of the world begged for food. The black market thrived. If you had gold or weapons, you could eat. If not, you died. The end of the world wasn't a sudden event. It was a slow, agonizing decline. Societies crumbled under the weight of hunger and despair. Nations turned inward, prioritizing their own survival over global cooperation. The once bustling cities became ghost towns, and the streets were filled with the echoes of what used to be. In the end, it was not a cataclysmic event that brought humanity to its knees, but the gradual erosion of hope and resources. You wake up one morning and your fridge is empty. You check your phone. No updates, no new deliveries. The last truck came 2 weeks ago, and no one knows if another will arrive. The grocery store is locked down, guarded by armed security, but there's nothing inside anymore. Your neighbor, once friendly, now watches you from his porch, rifle in hand, making sure you don't steal from his garden. At night, you hear gunshots in the distance. You don't know who's killing who, but you know it's over food. The world isn't ending all at once. It's ending one empty meal at a time. This is how it all ends.